Hi, everybody. My name is David Benkeser, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do here at Emory. I'm an associate professor in the department. I joined in 2017, so I'm coming up on almost 10 years here in the department. I'm actually an Atlanta native, so I grew up in the area. I went out to the West Coast to do a PhD in Seattle. I spent a little time as a postdoc in Berkeley before coming back home where my family lives, where my wife's family lives. And we're very happy to be back here. So, some of the things that I like to do outside of work, besides biostatistics, of course, is these days it's mostly spending time with my kids and driving my kids to and fro and dealing with my kids when they get sick. So, I have three young boys who are 8, 6, and 4. Who keep me quite busy outside of the office. But when I do find free time, other than taking care of children, I do like to exercise these days, mostly weightlifting, but in the past have done long distance running, some marathons. In my distant past, I also play on a darts team here in the city, so we play in a weekly darts league. And then finally, I am, I guess you could say, a masochist because I'm a big Atlanta sports fan, and anyone who's familiar with sports in the city of Atlanta knows that we have a history of teams being deeply disappointing. So that's another thing that I guess I suppose I enjoy spending my time doing outside of work. But at work, what do I focus on? Well, a lot of different things. So I'm highlighting one here. A big component of my research is trying to better understand how we can design studies, how we can generate data, or use existing data to increase our understanding of both whether vaccines are working, but also mechanistically understanding how they're working. So really trying to add to the body of knowledge that helps us, generate a body of evidence that allows individuals to better weigh the risk-benefit profile of vaccines. So this research spans working with a lot of different individuals across the vaccine development and evaluation spectrum. So we work with clinicians, immunologists, vaccinologists who are actually designing these products, who are understanding how they're being used in the clinic, who have an understanding of how patients interact with the medical system as it relates to vaccination. We also work closely with regulators. So I've worked with vaccine developers who are trying to bring a new product to market. And so they have to interface with regulatory bodies like the FDA or EMA. So we touch on some interactions with regulators as well. Of course, we want to work with public health agencies who are making vaccine recommendations, folks like CDC. And others. And so, really, it's a broad spectrum of different people who are contributing to this endeavor and that I have kind of access and contact with throughout the research process. Some of the key skills and tools that we use as part of this research. So I'm really here focusing on the science of what I do, but the statistical aspects of this are heavily driven by statistical methods rooted in causal inference. And the unique kind of aspect, I guess, to my research portfolio that I try to bring to causal inference is trying to leverage machine learning tools, so modern tools for regression, flexible estimation, dealing with data sets at scale, trying to bring those in and be able to perform robust causal inference using those techniques. I'm also a big proponent of reproducible coding, so I do a lot of development in R. I build R packages, and all of that kind of is brought to bear in this area as well. I work in other areas besides vaccines, more broadly infectious diseases, more broadly in clinical trials, but this is probably where the bulk of my work is happening these days. I love working with students. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. I typically will work with anywhere between 3 to 5. 5 is a little bit too many, but sometimes I end up with that many PhD students. I tend to shoot for more towards 3 or 4 PhD students, 1 to 2 master students, and I currently have one postdoc. So it's not a huge group of students, but it is a fairly large community that we have. Moreover, I'm also the director of the data science certificate here at Rollins, so I get to interact with people both in the biostat department as well as across the school who are participants in that certificate program. And with this upcoming data science degree that we're rolling out in fall of 2026, will be the director of graduate studies for that program. So if anyone is coming into that degree track, then I'll work closely with them to help with advising and picking out classes and navigating, student life here at Rollins. So in terms of research, the student experience working with me, I tend to have weekly meetings with students. They last about 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes if we're on a deadline, there will be more than one meeting a week. Sometimes if progress is slow or classes are taking up more time, we'll cancel a weekly meeting. But I do like to have a standing weekly touch point with each of my students. We have a weekly lab meeting. So I have a lab meeting that I host with a professor in the epidemiology department where each week we try out different pastries from around town and try to identify the best pastry shops as we talk about science and research. So that's a fun kind of community building activity. We do it on Friday morning, so we kind of start the weekend off right by having some yummy pastries and talking about science. And then more broadly, I try to look to engage my students, in the whole collaborative research process so that you're not just interacting with me, but you're also getting contact with, these other collaborators, clinicians, regulators, public health policymakers, getting students some experience working with those people, learning the language they speak. How do we communicate effectively with these people? So I try to look for opportunities to get students engaged in those spaces as well. One example I have here of a past student project. So this was an exceptional master's thesis that was performed a couple of years ago now, where a student used a machine learning pipeline that they built to develop personalized treatment recommendations that determined whether, a kid in a lower middle income country who presented with diarrhea, whether they should be treated with antibiotics or not. And that's kind of a tough clinical decision because not all causes of diarrhea are bacterial, right? And it's only those bacterial causes that are going to really benefit from treatment with antibiotics. Unfortunately, in these settings, we don't really have diagnostics to know, is this a virus causing diarrhea? Is it a bacteria? Is it a protozoa? And so instead, we have to rely on characteristics of the kid. What do we know about this child? What is their clinical presentation? And based on that information, could we develop a sane way to recommend whether or not somebody receives antibiotics to treat their diarrhea? So it was a really nice paper that's resulted in a publication in Nature Communications, as well as a methods paper that's also currently under review. So why Emory? What do I like about Emory the most? I have to say it's the people who work here. I think we have a really nice community here at Rollins that's highly supportive of each other and of our students, and it's overall just a really nice place to come to work. It's not a highly competitive environment, though everybody works hard, right? And it's not a place where we're competing for the same resources. Everybody here kind of succeeds when everyone else around them is succeeding. And that's kind of the philosophy, and it makes it a really collaborative place to come to work. So, advice for students as you're making your grad school decision, as you start taking your next steps towards, building a career in biostatistics or data science or whatever your focus area will be. I would say my best piece of advice is to really be a little bit intentional and a little bit introspective. So, thinking about what makes you curious? What makes you excited about this kind of work? And really understanding specifically what aspects of this work do you really like and enjoy, right? What aspects of this make you so curious that you don't mind working? It doesn't feel like work because it's something you're very excited about, right? And try to align, your decision making, whether it's choosing a grad school program or choosing a career, right? Try to align that with the things that make you happy, right? This is something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So to the extent that you can do things that make you excited, that drive your curiosity, I think you'll be all the better for it. So I think that's it for me for now. Looking forward to meeting some of you in person here. If you want to reach out in the meantime, here's my email address. Feel free to email me at any point. I've also listed my GitHub if you want to poke around and see the type of development projects I've worked on in the past. You can check that out as well. All right, so thanks very much for their time and hope to meet you soon.